Hi, Carina.
Hello, hello.
Well, why don't I kick it off by asking the same three questions I ask every podcast guest, which is, hi, how are you? How do we know each other? And where can people find you online?
Absolutely. So hi, I am doing okay. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, but living the dream on a daily basis. Um, let's see. We met back in the day at the infamous Chapman University in Orange, California. We were part of the founding sisters of the Kappa Alpha Theta chapter there. And where can people find me? They can find me pretty much everywhere. I really post a lot on LinkedIn, so you can obviously find me there. But you can also find me at stemfrom.org, which is my organization that I founded relatively recently. And we'll probably talk more about it. But yeah, stem from.
I am excited because I think you are the second Theta. I had Lauren Banky, aka now Dr. Lauren Saunders, on about a month ago, and it has been so wonderful. One of my favorite parts about this podcast is that I do get to reconnect with old friends and go back to the Chapman days. And I actually was invited to go back to Chapman. They put my book High Tolerance on display in Leatherby, and I have to say, the developments that they've done in Leatherby, it's wild. I certainly hadn't been in Leatherby. I've been on campus here and there, but they now rent laptops, which is really weird. So like you could go into the library and like put in your credit card and it'll give you a laptop to borrow if you forgot your laptop for the day. And like students actually do that. Like that's a thing. They have a print on demand like poetry thing. They got rid of all the bookshelves downstairs, so it's just an open space. It was really weird because so much was the same. Like all these memories of living in Leatherby libraries came back to me. So much is the same, and yet so much is different. And I think that that's beautiful. You're correct. We were in a sorority together, but actually, I also knew you were a science major of some sort, right? I feel like was it biology?
Yeah, I was originally bio, and then 2 years in, I added on a chem degree.
I'm wondering if we had a class together because okay, so you were bio and added chemistry. I had to apply as a chemistry major, but then go in, like, and then I went into the biochemistry program because they had just started that program my
Hmm.
freshman year. I don't know why I feel like we had a class together, but either way, I switched. So you switched by adding on, I switched by getting the hell out because I love STEM. But I do not have the chops. I do not have what it takes to go to med school. And they say C's get degrees, but C's do not get you into med school. So
No.
I was like, this is gotta change. And I'm really grateful, right? I followed my passion and blah blah blah. Can you say again the name of the business that you started recently?
Sure, absolutely. Stem from. So it's a take on I guess the colloquialism of where does your journey stem from, or like this stems from. Um, Mainly because I think a lot of people, their love of science originates from either something, someone, and I'm on a mission to understand and then proliferate all of those sort of uh, introductions to STEM.
Yeah. Well, and I want to take it back. When you decided to
Mhm.
study biology and chemistry, was the intention to go to medical school?
It was. It was. I started off as a molecular biology major, and historically, I mean, my dad's a primary care physician by training, and so I always was sort of on the path to follow him. So I have one sibling, a younger brother who has Down syndrome, and so I always kind of felt a little bit that the family legacy was on my shoulders, and being sort of the oldest child as well. Um, which is a little bit stressful, but I think in that I always really aligned with elementary education, middle school education, high school, blah, blah, blah. Science and mathematics was kind of my primary focus. It just came easy. It was pretty simple for me. And seeing that that was my father, I was like, there might as well be another Dr. Minardi in the family, right? And so that's sort of the inception, if you will. And it's a relatively interesting sort of way or happenstance in which I was introduced to research because I needed a way to differentiate myself on med school applications. And so I thought about it, in what kind of way could I potentially differentiate myself? And one of the ways would be to do research. And I was thinking about biological research, but there really wasn't any lab, particularly at Chapman, that aligned well with molecular or even pre-med. And so I had a female professor there who I had her for general chemistry lab. And I said, and I kind of reflected on it. I said, oh, why not? I could, go do some work, get some experience, have something that, differentiates myself with publications. And that really ignited in me, frankly, a love for research methodologies, how to do research, how to conduct research, how to ask pertinent questions, how to answer pertinent questions, and how to really devise an experiment. And that, the 5 years of doing, undergraduate research really did solidify in me that med school and becoming a clinician would be monotonous. It's if you think about patients being puzzles, yes, they are puzzles and you can solve puzzles, but at the same time, for me, it was answering those questions that are maybe theoretical in nature, application in nature. How do you better humankind in a scalable fashion? You don't necessarily do that as a clinician. And so when I really took a deep think about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to contribute my life towards a better, greater mission, I sort of went down the path of research.
I love that. So back to what you were saying about your brother, I always say that first daughters were born single mothers, aka we don't have a partner to help us raise the other children that our parents made. But I have seen that there is a fierce strength, I think, that comes when they're firstborn daughter, and maybe that stems from a little bit of said or unsaid bitterness about not being the first son. Can you I You mentioned that your brother has Down syndrome. I know that there was a bit of an age gap between us in college, but I realized I don't know a lot about your backstory. Can you tell me a little bit about growing up and what brought you to Chapman and how maybe some of that plays out in what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that single mother piece. I think even in elementary school, so I am 18 months apart with my younger brother, so he's relatively close in age to me. And um, throughout school, it was always I always watched out for him, and I mean, obviously, I still do. I share guardianship with him, with my parents for him. Um, and so that was quite a legal feat, if you will, in order to gain that, which you never, I think, as a kid, realize that that's going to have to be, what's going to happen to him if my parents were to have some catastrophe. Um, anyway, backing up, yeah. So I was born and raised in Orange County, California. I stayed there until I was around the age of 22. And then I packed my bags and moved to the East Coast because I really wanted to spread my wings. But, I have a mother and father who are still married. They're just celebrated their 42nd anniversary. And as I said, my dad is a clinician. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And then I have my little younger brother. And we lived in, the same house in Orange County for 16 years. And then we moved tremendously a far distance of less than 1 mile down the street to a new property. And then lived there for an additional, I think, 16, 17 years. So my family was, we've stayed in Orange County for a very, very long time. And I went through the public school district throughout my education. My kindergarten and first grade was actually at a private school, but then I was enrolled in public school, and my brother and we went through public school throughout our education until I decided, where I wanted to go to college. And frankly, I really wasn't at a place to move far from home. And, when you were talking about self-reflection on your careers, I was in a point of self-reflection for my college years in which I didn't want to go too far. I wasn't ready, and I knew I wasn't ready. And so it was essentially between University of California at Irvine or Chapman. And I got a fair bit of money from Chapman. And so I could stay on campus, but still have my family close. So when I talk about support systems, that's also a key concept for when you're choosing, a school, or whether it be undergrad or graduate school. Always think about your support system and your proximity to support system. So that was how I ended up at Chapman. And I thought that, small class sizes. I mean, my high school graduate class was over 800 students. And so I came from a really large high school. And so when I thought about Chapman, it was about the same size as my high school. And I said, okay, I could do this. And it would be easy for me to transition to a new space and a new place, make friends, because I'm essentially going from one atmosphere of a similarity in size to another, little bit of a different problems and culture, but that was it. And I immersed myself in a lot of different things at Chapman, which I really, really loved. Whether it was, theta, but later in the years, or whether it was in, research, as we talked about earlier, or other clubs and organizations. I was kind of a pretty eclectic person, which paved the way for me to continue with that, I think, eclectic sort of personality that I still hold true to today.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me, just for anyone who hears about STEM and doesn't know what it means, what is STEM? What does that stand for? I know it's science. I think I know them, but I don't want to embarrass myself. So I know that it's sciencey, but what is STEM? And then what does that mean? What kind of education did we have about STEM when you were at the high school level, and then even at the university level, and how has that maybe shifted over the last few years?
Yeah, so the acronym of STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And it's pretty much the quadruple threat, if you will, for the entirety of anything that has to do with an underpinning of science and science questioning. The idea behind STEM and the education of STEM so far, and I think it holds true to today in talking with all of the students that I do get to talk to, is the education around it is very proficiency and competency based, in that, you take a biology course, you get a grade, you move on to a chemistry course your next year, you get a grade, you move on to physics your next course. And I think there is, if I can be so bold, is that that's what I loved about research, was because it's not competency based. And so when you think about education, and STEM education in particular, it is complete a course, get a grade, move on. Whereas I think when you actually apply the methodologies that you do learn within STEM courses, how to approach calculating the different angles of a right triangle for trigonometry and trigonometric principles, the applications there to physics translate really relatively easy, but you have to be in that mindset to actually think about that translation. And I think the education has not changed, which is a little disappointing to me, with the advent of digital media, e-learning, um, a broadening a student's awareness around, okay, why am I balancing this chemical equation? You're balancing this chemical equation in order to do syntheses later on in life, because you're going to take organic if you're going to have any sort of semblance into a STEM career, specifically sciences. Um, and I think that is a huge miss in education. And that's part of, to tie it sort of back to my organization, is how do you tie it and create that awareness around students for what is the art of the possible around scientific principles beyond that of the classroom? Because the classroom, I think, is very traditional in nature, and I don't see it evolving quickly, if at all, in our lifetimes potentially. But I do see that there are some ways in which the classroom education can be augmented, if it's through digital learning, if it's through e-learning, and different platforms, so that you can create that awareness with students, and or just not only awareness, but also give them the opportunity to learn beyond the classroom.
Yes. When you say students, can you clarify what age are we talking about here?
Oh my gosh. That's the funny thing, is that I'm talking K through 12 and even undergrad. And it's shocking that it's that wide of a breadth of when you say students, because you don't necessarily, not you per se, but students don't necessarily have, whether it is elementary school, have the opportunity to see what scientific experimentation is like. And that can be even extrapolated all the way to undergrad. And I think there is some semblance of the connection between um, lecture and lab that's there. But all too many times I was frustrated, in particular in all of those classes, in which lab never correlated to lecture. And it never made sense to me, why we were doing things in lab that had nothing to do with what we were learning that week in lecture.
Yeah, can I pause you there, because
Yeah.
as a fancy distinguished biochemistry dropout, I dealt with that. I found it incredibly frustrating, the lack of cohesion between labs. So for anyone listening, because I want to make sure that we're making this digestible for anyone who is not of the STEM background. A lab is, typically for university courses, you go to a classroom and you leave the classroom and do some homework and take a test. But with many of the science courses, you go to the classroom for 3 hours a day, and then at some other point in the week, you have to do what's called lab for that same course. And you would think, like, if you're learning about, we'll just say water, because that's an easy, I say that easy, but not easy one. Let's say you're learning about water and the molecular breakdown of water all day long. You would think that you would go to a lab and put some water in a hydro flask and swirl it around and study the water. But then what I found was that we're going to lab and we're looking at, other chemical compounds, or even doing more lab work that is, to, as you said earlier, balancing chemical equations that have nothing to do with H2O. And that inconsistency did weird me out, that we had a separate book for lab and the actual, what is it called, classwork, or what is a normal class called? I don't know what to call that.
Lecture.
Lecture. Okay, cool. Lecture. Um, they're separate books, but then you're using both books. I remember thinking this, it just didn't feel cohesive for how my brain works. I didn't know that that was a little bit of a nuance of STEM classes in general. Do you feel that this maybe makes it difficult for STEM to be more accessible for students?
Oh, hands down, absolutely. I think that the cohesion is a huge point because I mean the ultimate premise of a lab is to experiment on what you're learning in lecture. You learn the theory in lecture, but sciences is the only place in which you can learn the theory and then go into a lab and actually see it work. You know, when you think about perfumes or the main premise of perfumes are esters, right? And in organic, one of the labs is creating an ester in which you create something that smells magical. It's floral, it's beautiful, but you start with a disgusting alcohol base and then you go through the reaction in order to create an ester. And what you're actually doing is taking the lecture principles that you learn in Orgo and you're applying them along with scientific rigor in a laboratory to then create something. And that frankly is magical. It is so cool and it's fascinating to me. But I think at the same time is that it's also highly frustrating if it doesn't have that cohesion, because it the whole point of it is to actually bring it to life for students.
Do you think, do you, just guessing here, so we both went to Chapman University and we both somewhat studied some STEM. I say somewhat for myself. Of course, you got 2 degrees from there, but they opened this Keck school and I was invited for the opening of that. Um, would you say, because I would look at that development and evolution at our university and make the assumption that there are more STEM programs, aka more students within STEM education. Is that a fair assessment, or are we seeing a decline? Is there more interest with the invention of, I'm going to say not the invention, with again, the prolific availability of, for example, the iPhone, which came out my freshman year of college? Well, now I just aged myself. Um, with the iPhone, which came out, my freshman year of college, meaning like we didn't all really have a cell phone in our back pocket until recently. I would say that that starts going into STEM from a technology standpoint. We see the evolution of cars, EVs, Tesla being a big one, um, Wi-Fi, all of these software, tech, STEM spaces. My guess is with the advent of all of these products that there are more people in STEM. Is that a fair assessment, or has it kind of stayed the same, or has it declined?
I think that's a fair assessment. I think you're talking about the consumerism around STEM and the consumer-based products around STEM, and I think that they have created, which is great, an awareness around where you can take your career if you do follow into a STEM path. Um, in addition to augment your answer, however, is that the the availability of careers and employment within STEM has boomed the last couple decades. Not only with what you're talking about, but also with the advent of AI, with the advent of, I mean, a huge area that I'm now in is health tech, which was not necessarily a thing when we were in college. And so if you think about sort of those directionalities, they have created a bit of a demand for students to get into STEM areas. And so you then see this like later shift of creating the supply, to put it into sort of economic terms, if you will. And so there is a great degree of demand for these students getting into different areas. And I think the interplay too, which is just fascinating, is how do you jump from one area of tech to another? Because I think a lot of the skills, and again, this is harkening back to essentially my mission with STEM from, is that When you are immersed into a STEM education, that you are essentially given a philosophical and way of thinking, and that is translatable to a vast array of different industries, like you were saying around Apple with its iPhone, whether you're talking about Tesla with the car, whether you're talking about health tech and all of the advent of AI around health tech and diagnosing with respect to technology. You can have a really versatile career in tech or engineering or mathematics, whatever have you. Now, because a lot of the skills that are embedded within your educational background is very versatile. And so it's great because there's a high demand and then you have some ways of pivoting around there.
Yeah, and where I think that stem from, if I understand, so stem from is, are you a resource for students individually or for educational institutions?
I like to think of myself as both. Of course, I'm 7 months into this entrepreneurial endeavor, and so I'm really figuring out my first primary focus is to the students because I think they're the ones that probably need it the best, or most, I should say. In addition to, they're the ones that I really love interacting with. So it's a little bit of a selfish piece for me. But I think when you think about the other thing that I've been thinking through with this endeavor is how do you augment educators, or how do you help them in augmenting their education and their content that they deliver in classes? In addition, how do you help parents create a sort of love for STEM within their kids? And there's a variety of different ways, obviously, to do that, but how do you help them think through what is the appropriate avenue for their kids? So it's a little bit of a e-learning, it's a little bit of reimagining how STEM can be portrayed in different sort of ways, shapes, and forms. And then it's also a little bit of a awareness campaign.
Oh, that's great. I think that that's really special. Again, finding more ways to attract students. I would say, as a former student, my memory says that the sciences, so the life sciences, the biology, not so much the social sciences as much, but speaking specifically to the STEM, was were the classes where students just were the least involved or excited. Would it be fair to say that you are serving students and aspire to serve students from a mentor standpoint to help walk them in lockstep, hand in hand into whatever their STEM journey may be? Is that a fair assessment to say that you're serving as a bit of a mentor?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of to augment it's my answer to your question is I think about it from a journey perspective in that um, maybe a decision in undergrad is then going to unlock doors into a decision in grad school. And so I think a lot of what I would like to do and what I would like to see is sort of build relationships that are long term in nature. Because I don't necessarily think that students are going to go down one path and stay in a very linear path forever. I think there's going to be pivots, there's going to be turns. And then what is their, how do they have that sort of uh, mentor in their back pocket that can say, okay, when you're assessing this situation, how do you think about it?
Mhm. Have you so mentorship is a hot topic for me for a myriad of reasons that we won't get into at the moment. It's very much at the forefront of my pursuits with my company EP Consulting, and also just being hyper aware of some of the mentorship I had, but ultimately the glaring lack of mentorship that I was able to create in my very niche market. Um, when you reflect back on your career journey as you step into mentorship on the other side, what was your relationship like with mentors? Did you have any that showed up for you at school, at work? What did that look like, or where might the gap have been?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I had a female research who I did undergraduate research at Chapman with, who was my mentor for a very long time, and she has evolved to my friend now, and that was great. But I think the one thing that when you talk about gaps, the one thing that I missed at Chapman and at graduate school, frankly, was any sort of real world mentor. I think a lot of the mentors that are at universities are professors, and that's great. But, when you know one thing, you're going to essentially sell one thing and mentor students into a do you want to be a professor? Do you want to, think about that? And I think it's not for everyone. And so I think that was a huge gap for me in how do you actually bridge into industry? How do you think about corporate world? And so I reflect back on that time, and it was through pure resilience and grit that I got through that, and that I said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to forge my path myself. And I am so, so fortunate that my I've had two opportunities in particular in my career in which my bosses, who I directly reported to, are my mentors, and they are the people that I am in constant communication with. I text them, and we are friends, obviously, but I rely on them and I need their guidance. And so I'm really proud to have them in my back pocket.
Yeah, I think that something that I've been telling some people is some of the conversations I've been having, and something that I gleaned from a friend, which I think is just so resonant for anybody at any stage of life, no matter what their aspiration is. So, as the eavesdroppers are sitting there, some of them want to change jobs, some of them want to start a family, some of them want to find a man. Can I get an amen to that? And they, whatever it is, whether it's marriage or a college degree or a new career or a career in a particular space, I think that whatever our aspirations are, we need three types of people in our life if there's something that we're seeking. And the first that we need is the mentor, right? We need someone who's found success in whatever space we're seeking that can then guide us through their journey. And I'm stepping into more of a mentorship role, and as are you, in my current phase of life, mentoring people on the corporate front, because I've been in that space for a while, and I can offer some advice and guidance and so forth. But the second person that you need is that person who's lockstep with you, side by side. So you talked about how some professors might mentor you, but then they're mentoring you to become a professor. And that's all well and good. But when you have people who are on the same pursuit or journey as you, your cohorts, your colleagues, your coworkers, your classmates, whoever it is, and they're pursuing the same goal, what they can provide that your mentor cannot is that active in the trenches. I'm doing it with you. Here's how I'm doing it day by day by day. I can tell people all day long how to apply to college using my experiences, but let's be real. Applying to college is a different ball game today than it was when I was applying. When I was applying for school, there were still pen and paper applications. Web applications were optional. Now I think it's 100% web. I don't know if they take paper applications anymore. I would argue there's probably more video and those type of submissions that just weren't even feasible. We didn't have cameras at home back then unless you were a weirdo. And so I can give all the advice all day long of, well, this is how I got into college and this is how I got a job, but it's a different world. So, yes, I can mentor you on the bigger picture things, but when it comes to those menial details, I'm not going to be able to do that. And the third person that you need, and this is the most important part, and it goes back to my ethos of always giving back and always serving, is you need that person who's pursuing something you already have. So, in motherhood, for example, I would say you need a mom who's got older children, but then you need a mom who's got children your age. And then when your children get a little bit older, you got to go be a mentor for a mother with younger kids so you can help her too. And what I think is so important about that third one is that you need someone who can remind you of all that you've been doing and building to get to where you are. Because I think we all need that reminder that we started somewhere. And here, today, right now, we have things that a past version of ourselves was striving to have, desperate to have. And it's so easy to obtain the degrees, the medals, the awards, the accolades, and forget that, wait a minute, there was a time where I was really trying to make this happen and I made it happen, and honoring that. And I think it's a lot easier to do it when we're in the space of mentoring others. So, whatever passion it is on your heart, I would say that those are the three people you need to do an inventory and say, okay, where's my mentor? Who am I building this with, even parallel? It doesn't mean that we're doing the same exact degree, but we're both on a similar parallel. And then, as we go through the ranks and get older, who can I find that I can bring along this journey with me and mentor them? And I love that you're building out a space to create that. I think that if the professors, not speaking on your professors, but just in general, right, that are, if they have the network of other individuals who are pursuing with them, right, they would be able to hand you and say, well, you don't have to be a professor. My cohort in undergrad, ended up now designs perfumes, which was actually what my backup plan was. So my first plan was go to pre-med. My second plan was, okay, if I don't get into med school, I'm going to make perfumes. That's what I wanted to do. And then I thought about water treatment a little bit. And then again, I realized I don't got the chops to hang out too long. But I think that I was kind of creating these career ideas myself because the only spaces I was told were, okay, doctor or professor. That's what I felt like I was getting from my degrees, that the program that I was in, and that's ultimately why I deviated. And so the fact that you're able to provide that comprehensive outlook, I think is really beautiful. See, now I'm very long-winded. I'm sorry. Um, can
You're
you
fine. And if I could interrupt you, I would also I love that three person. I think in addition to that though, there's also you know, I need a mentor or a person in the trenches um of not necessarily just academic. It's also in other stages in life, like someone who is also like what you were talking about with the mother figure. Like that is something that I think is, it's not for all of us. And there's sometimes I love pets. And so I love having a sort of mentor around, okay, thinking around how you think about animals and animal care, or someone who's in the trenches who's a volunteer alongside you, or someone who has, a rescue. I mean, that's kind of where I'm thinking around. It's not just around your career, but it's also in different facets of life. So didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, I
I think
love that.
that's a huge
Well,
point too.
I'm glad you brought up your pets because I'm going to pretend that you named your hamster after me. Is that the case? Is that my namesake? I've yet to have
Duh.
someone name their daughter. Okay, thank you. All right. So in terms of mentorships, I think, yes, we both share disappointments. And then when you look at your career that you've built in STEM, can you speak a little bit outside of the science and tech and engineering space? Like, what is something unexpected that you've learned or earned or recognized, gleaned, enjoyed through your work in STEM thus far?
That's a great question, and I would answer it actually um, from something that I learned from one of my mentors. Um, Scientists and everyone who has a background within STEM is, and actually I said this at a panel, and it was really interesting. I got a lot of nods at this, but people who have a background in STEM classically think in black and white, zero or ones, binaries, right or wrong. And they're not everything can be thought of in that way, shape, or form. And so what has surprised me is that growing up and circling back with my brother, is that I've had to be very patient and I've had to live a very kind life with respect to helping him. And so when I think of applying all of my knowledge to any industry and any job that I've had in my career, what has surprised me more is that I've also had to leverage that sort of kindness and patience side, because that is not readily available in any many of the industries that STEM individuals work in. And yet, that goes a lot further than knowing the right answer immediately.
Okay, I really really love that. Also, I okay, I love that because yes, be kind. Be kind, be kind. I and kind is not always nice and they're not one and the same. And I really could take you down a rabbit hole through some of the unkind things that I experienced during my tenure within STEM, but I won't. That's a genuine cough. That's not me being funny. Excuse me. And I do, I will say that we could probably go down a whole rabbit hole and go a whole different direction with this podcast. And I've really been fighting it, but I'm just going to bring it up that, and it's not to validate you, but it's to give it air that the decision, whether it was yours involuntary or not, right? But this decision that you are the caretaker of your baby brother, which my brother who is not, right? He does not have Down syndrome or any type of, we'll say, um setbacks or anything like that. I still feel like a caretaker, like I need to take care of him, and he's a father, and I think about how I need to take care of him and his son. But when you make that commitment as a legal guardian, it's a whole nother level. I am not my brother's legal guardian. And I really do want to honor the beauty and selflessness in that, whether or not you were, quote, given a choice, right? Because I think sometimes in life, people will say, well, I had no other choice. And maybe in some weird way we do, but ultimately the circumstances are as so. And I want to honor that. And I could talk a whole lot more about that if we had time today, but I think it is really special, but then also honoring that it's tremendously, like, it's a responsibility. It adds another layer and depth to the pressure that we put on ourselves as older sisters, as motherly figures in general, of taking care of others. And I really want to applaud that because I think it's incredible. And a big part of that is kindness, and it's not always nice and it's not always pretty, but choosing kindness, choosing to take care of one another, I think is so beautiful. And the fact that you're bringing that into your work is so tremendously inspirational and really deserves praise. So I want to offer that without placating you or patronizing you in any way. Um
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's it's a big job, but at the same time, it's what you got to do sometimes. And it wasn't forced on me by any means, but it's also kind of like, well, it's already been 34 years of this. Why not keep it going?
I love that. I love that. Well, again, I could really do a whole different podcast with you and like talk about your dating life and where that shows up because I have my own stories and backgrounds and things on this subject matter of legal guardianship. But we won't do that today. If you ever want to come back and have a controversial talk, we totally can. And because I would love to. I have so many thoughts and so many ideas that go into the eugenics and space, if you will. But we won't do that today because we don't have time. But I would love to have you back if that's something you're into. Looking ahead as we start closing out, what is a dream project? Like, do you have anything that's like kind of aching inside you to get out, like a project, some type of innovation, something you want to see in the world, something you want to see in your immediate world? Like, is there something in the future on the horizon that you're looking forward to or hoping to see a development in?
That's a great question. I think for me, what is synergistic to what we've been talking about, I think there is what I would love to see is innovation in education, um, and creating a way in which we deviate away from grades and competencies, and one in which we essentially just master natural curiosity amongst kids. I think that is something that I would love to see. That is something that I hope I could build one day and have the way in which and the power to influence, because it's not just at an educational level, it's also at a policy level, that we're going to have to make some changes. Um, that is a really lofty, lofty goal, which I would love to again see. Um, I do have, I'm an avid, we haven't talked about this at all, but I am an avid reader. I love reading. I have a log since 2001, and I've logged every single book that I've ever written since then. And I just logged book 750. And so I have a scratch off poster, if you will, of like the 100 books that you need to read in a lifetime. And I'm almost done with it. So, I mean, short term goal, that is a short term goal. So I've given you a little bit of the spectrum of long term and short term.
Ooh, I love that. Well, and I want to clarify of the 750 books that you talked about, those are ones that you've read, right? Not written?
Oh, yes, red.
Okay, perfect. I love that. That reminds me of the Pizza Hut Club. I don't know if you had that at your school, but we had the Pizza Hut Club with the readers, and you would do the stickers, and you would log every book with a sticker. So I think that that's really cute that you still have that. I love that you read. Have you read my book, Karina?
Are you going to send me a copy that's signed?
Fair. Touche, darling. I totally had to put you on the spot. I can't help myself. No, I think that's I to be fair, I have not read your books. I could barely read the title of your books. Okay? They were a little complicated for my little brain. And I will say that I think that on the note of the evolution of education in STEM, in many ways the educational system failed me. I have a curiosity. I love, especially on the tech front, which was not even a space that was that is I am I can code a little bit. I coded my own video game years ago, and then I designed something with my Java coding, but didn't come out exactly how I hoped. But still, I have a natural curiosity, and because of the way that our infrastructure is of our education system, unfortunately, it left me feeling like I just wasn't good enough. And I think that that's such a shame because as a diverse woman in the space, which I wasn't going to bring that up, right? But like, let's just be frank. I think it's a shame that a mind such as mine was not really cultivated in the STEM space. And then that's where I ended up ushering to business. And I'm grateful for that. But what a sad, tremendous loss to lose brilliant, sharp minds because our system is not necessarily set up in a way because of the grading system and various things upon which you touched, that they're not even allowing for a space for who knows what type of inventions or accelerated programs could be available if we just thought outside of the rigid structures. I will say, I think AI, which is my current passion, I've been taking several AI classes. I've been playing around with several AI tools, and I'm very excited and passionate about them. I do think they're going to level set things a little bit. And the gatekeeping within STEM is not things that were elusive because of particular programming, coding, language on the tech side, particular of course, in health tech, I'm sure you're seeing it as well. Certain studies, certain findings, theories, research, and so forth, a lot of it is going to be more readily available through the acceleration of AI. And that excites people like me who now will have an opportunity to step into the STEM space because it really does level set a bit. I think for some people that freaks them out. They're like, oh no 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 no, it's gonna open up it's going to open up the gate, it's going to shatter this gatekeeping, it's going to open up the floodgates. And I think there will be a balance and parameters, but I personally am so excited to see how AI revolutionizes health tech. I'm excited to see how healthcare providers will be able to provide better healthcare to their patients because of the revolution of artificial intelligence. I have a dream between you and me of building out a system for private doctors where I'm using AI based upon some of their decision making and voice and all these things in the past, and then I'm replicating their brain in some ways for very menial asks, so that way they can dedicate their time to patient care, research and development, and taking care of their patients, and not some of these more difficult, we'll say, red tape assignments that our healthcare providers are forced to participate in because of legislation and, as you touched upon, policy. So I personally am really excited about artificial intelligence because I think that if I were had the same desire in my heart that I did when I was entering school, the outcome might be a little bit different. So, and you're a part of that revolution. So I'm really really excited. And I just thank you so much for coming on and sharing STEM from today. I will make sure to link your company, your website, and relevant information in the show notes. So anybody who wants to find you and be inspired, and learn more about how you can mentor, coach, consult either their children or themselves or even their classrooms, I would love for them to be able to reach out to you. Um, as we close out, I want to end on the note that I ask every podcast guest, which talks about this idea of the Ceph philosophy. It's this philosophy that I made up and ideated myself. It's not yet a technical term, but I'm trying to make it one. And the Ceph philosophy is based upon the idea of having balance across a spiritual, emotional, financial, and physical realm. So finding balance and success in all four pillars and dimensions. As you think about your Ceph balance and your Ceph success, where today do you feel the strongest and where do you help to develop a bit more?
I love that. And I think that you need to trademark it and copyright it. So just FYI. I think for me, I am uh, probably the strongest emotionally right now. I think I'm at a pretty stable place. I have a loving partner. I have a loving family. So I think emotionally, I'm at the strongest that I've been. And grad school was very very hard on me emotionally. So it's taken me almost 10 years to build back um, what I lost. I think physically, I think that's my weakest right now. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of health setbacks in the last year, and so I think that has created some issues, and I need to get back to where I was. So, you win some, you lose some.
Amen. I mean, I think so where the Ceph philosophy stemmed from was my lifelong journey with various health battles that I've touched upon a little bit in this podcast, but not too deeply. And I will say that this belief, like I'm with you. I think that life is a whack-a-mole. You can't be firing on all cylinders at all times. It's just not how we as very flawed human beings are. And as you navigate your physical recovery from some health setbacks, I am right there with you. I am on a constant, more than ever, over the last, after some issues I had in 2017, I am on a vigilant path to getting complete control of my physical health. And I think my physical health in so many ways looks like a Google stock. It's like, yeah, I'm getting better if you take a step back, but boy, day to day, there are some significant setbacks. Like, I'm getting better, I'm getting stronger. Right now, today, Carina, I'm dealing with some painful setbacks that I wasn't expecting. And I need to schedule a doctor's appointment. So I am right there with you on the physical battle. And it's so interesting because I created the Ceph philosophy really because of some emotional setbacks I had. So the idea was, okay, Ella, you're physically strong and you're financially doing okay and spiritually you're great, but man, your emotional situation's a little bit of a mess. And now it has really evolved for me because I'm like, okay, let's get that physical. Emotionally, I feel very strong and resilient, but physically, I'm still struggling a bit. So I'm with you on there. That's definitely mine right now. But I am grateful to be walking this journey with you. I am forever grateful to Chapman University and Kappa Alpha Theta for uniting us. And I just really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story today. Yay!
No, this was fun. This was really fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening in to Eavesdrop with Ella. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe, rate, or review Eavesdrop with Ella on your favorite podcast platform. While you're at it, you should also send this episode to a friend so we can connect with more eavesdroppers just like you. If you'd like to be a guest, you can visit ellaparlor.com to learn more. Until next time, this is Ella Parlor reminding you to stay resilient, stay abundant, and above all, stay balanced. Thank you for eavesdropping, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Eavesdrop with Ella, a production of EP Consulting. Some of the products and services mentioned are paid promotions, and any advice should be confirmed with a qualified professional. Opinions and ideas are for entertainment purposes only and belong to EP Consulting. All rights reserved.